Hello, I'm Bakhtar Salwa and you're watching A News Now. Let's take a look at today's top stories. Zelensky says Ukraine will work with the United States on peace plan without betraying national interests. Global leaders gathered in Johannesburg for a G20 summit hosted in Africa for the first time. And COP30 climate talks in Brazil have reached a tentative deal after a day of overtime negotiations. President Volodymyr Zelensky pledged on Friday to work fast and constructively with the United States on a peace plan to end Ukraine's war with Russia, but said he would not betray his country's national interests. In a video statement, he urged the Ukrainians to remain united in what he described as one of the most difficult moments in the country's history.
Speaking in a nationally broadcast address, President Volodymyr Zelensky warned that Ukraine is facing what he called one of the most dangerous crossroads in its modern history, a moment where military pressure meets political pressure.
Now is one of the most difficult moments in our history, either the loss of dignity or the risk of losing a key partner, either the difficult 28 points or an extremely difficult winter, the most difficult, and further risks.
The widely leaked US peace plan includes proposals that Kiev had previously ruled out, ceding eastern areas it now controls, significantly cutting its army size, and pledging not to join NATO. Still, Zelensky says diplomacy isn't off the table, but Ukrainian sovereignty is non-negotiable. He urged the country, now entering its fourth winter of full-scale war, to stay united.
The national Ukrainian interest must be taken into account. We are not making loud statements. We will calmly work with America and all partners. Stop the quarreling. Stop the political games. The parliament of a warring country must work unitedly. The government of a warring country must work effectively.
As Kyiv weighs diplomatic pressure, Moscow says it has already reviewed the same US proposal and is signaling openness. Speaking to officials, Russian President Vladimir Putin said the document could serve as a legitimate base for ending the war.
I believe it can be used as the basis of a final peaceful settlement, but the US administration has so far failed to secure Ukraine's consent. Ukraine is against it. If Kyiv does not want to discuss President Trump's proposals, then they must understand that the events that took place in Kupiansk will inevitably be repeated in other key areas of the front line.
On the battlefield, the war continues. Russia said late on Thursday that it had taken control of Kupiansk, a large town that straddles the Oskil, but Ukraine denied it had fallen. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Russia's battlefield progress should convince Ukrainian president to negotiate now rather than later.
U.S. President Donald Trump says Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky must approve a U.S.-backed peace plan to end Russia's invasion. In the interview to Fox News Radio, Trump said November 27th as the deadline for accepting a 28-point peace plan proposed by his administration. Later, speaking from the Oval Office after meeting New York Mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani, Trump called the war a conflict that should never have happened, noting the staggering casualties.
Yeah, we have a way of getting peace. We think we have a way of getting peace. He's going to have to approve it. Just so sad, so many people. You know, last month they lost 25,000 soldiers. This is something, we haven't seen anything like this since the Second World War. And they're averaging 6,000 or 7,000 a week between the two of them, dead soldiers. And it goes on, and I think they're getting reasonably close, but
United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres addressed ongoing global conflicts during a press conference ahead of the G20 summit in South Africa on Friday, commenting reports of a 28-point peace plan for Ukraine backed by President Donald Trump. Guterres said no formal proposal has been presented.
And we need a just, sustainable and comprehensive peace in Ukraine, in accordance with the UN Charter, international law, and the resolutions of the General Assembly. First of all, we don't know what the peace plan is. I just read on the papers that Russia has not yet received any peace plan. So we are talking about something that is in the press, but was never presented formally by the United States or by any other entity. And so obviously for us, a peace solution for the Ukraine that is in line with these principles would also abide by the resolutions of the General Assembly that have clearly indicated that the territorial integrity of the Ukraine, and in general around the world, the territorial integrity of states must be respected.
The G20 summit opened in Johannesburg with South Africa declaring overwhelming support for a joint declaration despite the absence of the United States. President Donald Trump boycotted the event, criticizing South Africa's leadership and opposing its climate and development agenda.
For the first time in history, Africa is hosting the G20 summit. But the United States, one of the bloc's most influential members, is not at the table.
Thank you. This G20 Leader Summit has a responsibility not to allow the integrity and the credibility of the G20 to be weakened. In fact, from this summit, we should have a sense that the G20 has been strengthened.
Washington's boycott follows President Donald Trump's disputed claims about South Africa's treatment of white citizens and his rejection of the summit's climate-centered agenda, which focuses on renewable energy transitions, debt relief, and adaptation support for developing nations. Despite the absence of the United States, negotiators reached consensus on a draft declaration that includes some of the strongest climate language ever adopted by the group. The final communiqué, now formally endorsed, calls for accelerated renewable energy expansion, urgent climate action, and improved support for heavily indebted developing nations, positions long resisted by the Trump administration. The UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, addressing the summit, laid out a 5-point plan for global economic growth, from lowering tariffs to reducing sovereign debt, thanking South Africa for hosting and wishing the United States success when it assumes the G20 presidency in 2026.
Finally, we do need to work together to tackle the unique challenges facing emerging economies, especially in Africa, whether it's the growing debt burden or the financing gap for the Sustainable Development Goals. This G20 is the moment to respond to these structural challenges and to deliver more stable and resilient finance. Fragility in the Middle East, rising threats of authoritarianism and fragmentation, as well as Russia's ongoing unjustified war in Ukraine. The shockwaves of that invasion are still reverberating through global markets today. It has hit growth, driven up food and energy prices, and deepened persistent imbalances and instability across the world.
Starmer said that G20 countries needed to go further under the common framework to make debt restructuring better, faster, and easier, and that more private capital needed to be mobilized.
European leaders have voiced concerns over a U.S. plan to end the Ukraine war and say draft proposals are a basis which will require additional work. In a joint statement issued at the G20 summit in South Africa, they said the plan includes important elements that will be essential for a just and lasting peace, but cited concerns over borders and limitations on Ukraine's armed forces. It comes a day after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky warned Kiev faced, quote, one of the most difficult moments in our history over pressure to accept a plan. A former British MEP has been jailed for more than 10 years after admitting to accepting pro-Russian bribes, a case that has ignited a political storm in the United Kingdom and raised urgent questions about foreign influence in domestic politics.
A former British politician has been sentenced to over 10 years in prison for accepting pro-Russian bribes. Nathan Gill, ex-leader of Reform UK and Wales and former MEP, admitted taking payments to promote pro-Russian positions in the European Parliament. Between December 2018 and July 2019, Gil received approximately £40,000 from Ukrainian pro-Russian politicians. Prosecutors say he made speeches, tabled motions, and gave media interviews in line with these payments. During interviews with police, Gil refused to comment on his involvement.
You know Oleg Voloshin?
No comment.
Even as investigators pressed him on his links to Oleg Voloshin, a Ukrainian politician involved in coordinating these payments, Gil remained silent. The British Prime Minister says this case underscores the urgent need for transparency within political parties and raises concerns about foreign influence on UK politics.
And I think that demands that Nigel Farage investigate how that happened within his party, and equally importantly, what other links there are between his party and Russia. And that needs that. In fact, he should get up today. He's usually got plenty to say, and say, in light of this shocking result with a long prison sentence, to see how serious it is, undermining our interests as a country, he should set up an inquiry, an investigation into his home party. How did that happen on his watch, in his party, and what other links are there between his party and Russia? That's what he should do.
Gil's actions have sent shockwaves through British politics. Reform UK, currently ahead in opinion polls, described his conduct as reprehensible, treasonous, and unforgivable.
Now to COP30 summit in Brazil. According to Reuters sources, 2-week climate talks resulted in a deal after negotiators resolved a protracted standoff over the balance between action to cut greenhouse gas emissions and provide climate finance. The talks deadlocked after the European Union have pressed on moving away from the fossil fuels. However, COP30 climate talks have reached a tentative deal, which includes points on speeding up climate action, reviewing related trade barriers, and urging wealthy nations to triple poorer nations' funding for dealing with the climate impacts by 2035. In Belém, host city of COP30, Brazil is finding new ways to turn the Amazon into a source of sustainable jobs, using its forest products like açaí, Brazil nuts and herbs to create income without harming the environment.
As host of the COP30 Climate Summit, Belém is showcasing a new economic model to help locals earn from the Amazon without cutting down forests. Instead of clearing land for cattle or mining, the state of Pará is supporting the production of forest goods like açaí, Brazil nuts and herbs for global markets. The state recently opened a $56 million bioeconomy and innovation park near Belém's historic Vero Peso market. The facility provides labs, machinery and training for entrepreneurs to develop foods, cosmetics and other products from Amazon resources. Local businesses, such as artisanal herb producers and açaí exporters, have already scaled up, creating jobs and supporting hundreds of families.
Well, the story of Salt is actually very exciting for me, because we managed to increase the number of families. I always say this, and I get goosebumps when I talk about it, because when I first entered the bioeconomy park, I saw a great opportunity for us to expand our production capacity.
Açaí in particular has seen a market boom. Prices per pot have risen from $3 to $11 and exports to Europe are growing. The park also supports coffee growers who combine organic farming with reforestation, helping small farmers generate income while restoring the forest. Pará Governor Helder Barbalho said the goal is to turn the Amazon's biodiversity into a new economy that reduces reliance on industries that harm the environment.
May we reduce our dependence on extractive economies, on economies based on greenhouse gas emissions, and move toward low-emission economies, toward economies that value living forests.
Brazil hopes this approach will show the world it is possible to protect the rainforest while creating jobs and sustainable wealth for its communities.
Brazil's COP30 summit appears to have reached a tentative breakthrough after days of deadlock over fossil fuel commitments and climate finance. With the final text still pending, negotiators say an overnight push by the Brazilian presidency helped unlock the path to consensus, while a separate G20 statement underscored rising global pressure for stronger climate action. To help us understand the significance of this development and what to expect next from the COP30 outcome, we are joined by political analyst Diogo Castro Silva. Diogo, welcome to the program.
Hi there.
Mr. Silva, what do we know so far about the tentative deal that negotiators reached overnight, and how significant was Brazil's role in breaking the deadlock?
Well, I think Brazil was dealt kind of an impossible hand because the problems with the current climate framework go well beyond COPs and go well beyond Brazil's capacity. I think we are witnessing a different geopolitical landscape, and that means that global efforts in terms of policy, in terms of addressing a challenge like climate, very much in doubt. Now, given that it was dealt an impossible hand, I think there are some positive things to take from the agreement. But the first thing to be fully transparent is that the agreement, which is mostly concentrated on adaptation, the global policy framework has recognized the impossibility to arrest climate change. The measures to arrest the warming of the planet have failed. And so now we are going beyond that to the question of adaptation, which is a different thing, a different aspect, but it just recognizes the reality that we have lost the timing to forestall the warming of the planet, and now we have to address the questions of adaptation to mitigate its effects.
Diogo, the standoff centered on fossil fuel language and climate finance. Which side seems to have conceded more?
Well, I think Brazil, the fossil fuels agenda that Brazil tried to put forward has been defeated. So in that sense, Brazil could not push for the fossils transition agenda. I mean, there are mainly that on one hand, countries that produce fossil fuels are not very open to that. And then the geopolitical question regarding energy, and not only because of the war, which, for example, in Europe meant that the question of energy security and not only the green agenda was important. And finally, the question of AI and data centers that put a lot of actors that for a long time, namely the big techs that were in favor of a more climate-friendly agenda, on the other side of the table, because they are the fastest growing energy consumption sector is precisely data centers related to AI. So I think on that side, there is a clear defeat, and that's why I meant that trying to forestall the warming of the planet is a lost battle. There seems to be some breakthroughs around the question of adaptation, but that means we are going to live with more extreme weather and with warming planets going in the future.
Diogo, thank you very much for your insights. We truly appreciate your time. Due to internet issues, we cannot talk. So we continue with the regional stories. A month after the first expert meeting in Yerevan, its reciprocal round is now underway in Baku. And our deputy editor-in-chief, Orkan Amashov, has more on that.
A month after the first ever self-organized and government-backed bilateral meeting of Azerbaijani and Armenian experts and civil society representatives in Yerevan, Baku is now hosting a reciprocal arrangement. Today, I've spoken to two participants of the second encounter, two Armenian participants of that very encounter, and we discussed a number of issues related to the format of their engagement with Azerbaijani counterparts, the peace process, its key components, and what is to come as long as the next crucial year of 2026 is concerned. Stay tuned.
Here in Baku, media experts from across the D8 countries have come together to talk about collaboration, innovation and the future of media, while exploring ways to build a stronger, more unified voice in today's fast-changing journalism landscape.
Regular basis, even if virtually through video conference.
We are here at the D8 Media Forum 2025 in Baku. Attendees from all member countries have gathered for the opening sessions where media experts will share insights on key media-oriented topics. Panels, discussions and network sessions are already lined up for the sake of building momentum and sparking ideas that could actually transform the media scenery among the D8 member states.
The Developing 8 Organization for Economic Cooperation held its media forum, bringing together media leaders and policymakers from Azerbaijan, Bangladesh, Egypt, Indonesia, Iran, Malaysia, Nigeria, Pakistan and Turkey to reaffirm stronger cooperation and shared narratives in the media realm. Proposal included cultural exchanges, documentary co-productions, training journalism and media partnerships. The forum also highlighted the D8 Media Excellence Centre, led by Azerbaijan, which will support joint media projects, training, cultural programmes and media research.
And right now, in the heart of the forum, the energy is even more tangible. As we speak, policymakers, senior media representatives, and prominent journalists are taking part in sessions focused on responsible journalism and digital innovation.
Panel sessions addressed global media challenges, digital innovation, fact-checking, and crisis communication. Members emphasised a unified media vision and deeper information exchange.
Like you know, D8 is like a committee of nations, and the agenda for this time is how to tackle misinformation, fake news and disinformation at this era of artificial intelligence and fake news, where we have all these things fueling division. But as D8, we are coming together to see what can we do, what strategy can we deploy to ensure that we move forward in terms of information management at an international level.
Well, actually, I think we already achieved a lot. The fact that leading media professionals and officials are meeting in this forum to further boost cooperation, not just in the economic field, but in the information and communication field as a driving force to manage social exchange and delivery of messages.
Building on these achievements, member states are now formalising steps to guide their collective media efforts.
So we just started, and I think I've proposed a Baku Declaration in which we will be able to lay out the guidelines, the rules and the way forward. So hopefully I think it will be very positive.
The D8 Media Forum is fostering innovation, partnership and coordinated communication, paving the way for a cohesive and forward-looking media landscape across member countries.
In an important development, Afghanistan and Uzbekistan have renewed a key electricity transmission agreement, securing power supplies for 2026 and aiming to stabilize Afghanistan's struggling energy grid. Our correspondent Tamim Bahiz has more details from Kabul.
The renewed deal means Uzbekistan will continue exporting electricity to Afghanistan next year. Afghanistan relies heavily on its neighbors for power, and Uzbek imports remain the single largest source. Right now, Afghanistan produces only a fraction of its own electricity, around 250 megawatts domestically, while it imports more than 70% of its power from countries including Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Iran, and Tajikistan. As a result, millions of residents, especially in Kabul, depend on foreign electricity to keep homes, industry, and hospitals running. But the system is fragile. Power cuts are common, particularly in winter, and only about 1/3 of Afghans are connected to the national grid. Much of the country's transmission network is outdated or incomplete, and disruptions in neighboring states often lead directly to blackouts inside Afghanistan. This agreement aims to ease those problems. Afghanistan's state utility, the Afghanistan Breshna Shirkat, says the new contract will secure electricity for 2026 and support a series of major infrastructure projects already underway. For now, the renewed agreement offers some reassurance that Afghanistan's power supply will continue into 2026. But experts warn that until the country develops more of its own generation capacity, it will remain vulnerable to outages and regional supply disruptions. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Baku has just concluded a two-day roundtable that brought together 5 Armenian experts in a fresh push to advance civil society engagement between Azerbaijan and Armenia. The initiative, which follows a reciprocal visit to Yerevan last month, aims to deepen dialogue and build trust as part of the evolving peace agenda. To help us understand the broader significance of this effort and what it means for the normalization process, we're joined by Nargiz Mammadova, expert in international relations at STEM Center, who joins us from Baku, Azerbaijan. Nargiz, welcome to the program.
Hello, thank you for the invitation.
So how meaningful is this roundtable for civil society dialogue between Azerbaijanis and Armenians at this phase of the peace process?
Well, I think I will say it's even vital for the both sides, because when we talk about like governmental, let's say some governmental discussion, it's already going on after Washington summit. But the track to diplomacy is essential because the peace is not built between governments, it's also built between communities. And we need to understand, can we trust to Armenian society in this process, as well as Armenian people should understand their trust issues with Azerbaijani side. And I think that in this case, we should focus on how think tanks in Armenia are working, what they are thinking about, and they also should be acknowledged about the think tanks in Azerbaijan, about the experts and NGOs and civil societies or civil society organizations working in Baku, about their position, or as we call, track to diplomacy.
Nargiz, do you believe such dialogues can realistically feed into or shape the political aspects of the peace process in a meaningful way?
I think, yes, there are lots of opportunities for it. I think that the first steps that have been done in Yerevan and today in Baku are very paramount for both sides in case of further continuing of dialogue between two sides. We have lots of different, let's say, cases in different post-conflict situations in Bosnia, in Congo, in let's say in Cuba, after conflict sides try to not only pick up the governmental initiatives, but also pick up the initiatives from the civil society, from the experts and think tankers. I think that it can help further to build relationship based on trust and stability.
So when addressing highly sensitive or emotionally charged issues, what obstacles or limitations do participants typically encounter in such forums?
Well, theoretically, when I studied in the UK, we learned the psychology of conflict and post-conflict, and the main thing that is vulnerable for both sides of the conflict, or for any side of conflict, is how to build a truthful relationship after a pain of war. And actually, in this case, it's very hard because this conflict was over 20 years, and it's not easy at one click forget everything.
And finally,
For this case,
yeah, you
yes.
may continue.
For this case,
Continue, Nargis.
yeah. And for this case, I should highlight that in this case, we should also focus on the psychology of the conflict and post-conflict and take the best experience from the world.
Nargis, also, if momentum behind the peace agenda continues, how do you expect these civil society engagements to evolve in the near future?
I think it would be better, first of all, to continue such meetings in Yerevan, in Baku, or in other cities of Azerbaijan and Armenia. Why not? I think that the number of participants should be increased. And the second, I wished that maybe in future there will be special meetings for the youth of two countries, like youth from Armenia and youth for Azerbaijan can sit and talk about the future of our region, how to interact with each other, how we can communicate, and how we can maybe cooperate in future, because it's our region.
Nargis Mammadova, thank you once again for your valuable insights and for joining us. We appreciate your time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much. Bye.
You're up to date with World News for the Hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.